Welcome back to Kinda Hot and Kinda Healthy with your two favorite women's health coaches.
We are talking life, relationships, and everything else besides teaching you how to count your macros. Now let's dive in.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Kinda Hot, Kinda Healthy. Today, Maddie and I have a really great interview with one of our internet friends, Justine. It is going to be a really fantastic episode. However, I do want to throw a trigger warning on the episode. It is, we talk about some intense topics, but it is a really great interview.
Yeah, and she even said, during the interview, she didn't realize it was going that way. I didn't realize it was going that way. But I think for any woman here or man too, if I don't know
they, them,
came out like that.
Everyone,
all the people, that if you've dealt with a toxic relationship of any kind, doesn't have to be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be a partner, it could just be
family, anybody.
Yes, family. She has been through it and got to the other side, and it's just really inspiring to also hear her kind of own her story, and how many women that have reached out to her after sharing her story. That was super empowering to hear, is that there's other women dealing with this same issue. And again, it could be anyone dealing with this, but women in particular reaching out. But yeah, it was a great interview. And yeah, you said it earlier too, we were on an emotional ride. I was on an emotional ride.
Yeah, it was just such an amazing experience, because we know Justine from, mentorship circles and that sort of stuff. So we have heard her story, and, we follow her, obviously, we get her story, but to have her sit down with us, it just brings in so much deeper. And she also said this, this is just scratching the surface. So you can imagine, after listening to the episode, you're like, holy shit, that's just the surface. But, It was really crazy, because, everybody has, a story and how it can impact their life and the decisions that you make. And Justine's such a great example of how this one decision that she made, it changed the trajectory of her life, which is so crazy. I feel, people always say oh, life is so short and blah, blah, blah. And it's oh, okay, that's crazy, because life is long. And sometimes you find yourself making maybe not the best decisions, or not allowing yourself to live your fullest life. And you're just oh, whatever, it is what it is. But Justine is such a great example of kind of you don't need to settle. You don't need to allow yourself to be in this space. So it was awesome. Is there anything you want to add, Maddie, or anything you want to share before we jump into the interview?
We forgot to do our catch-up first, but that's fine.
Oh yeah, I mean, anything you need to share. I got a new microphone, and you guys are going to see this episode, whenever you see it, because we're going to be, having a lot of guests and whatnot. But I feel official. I feel like the queen. I am. And James got it for me, and I was telling Maddie, I was it was supposed to be for Christmas, but I was James, we have some interviews coming up. And he's okay, you can open it early. And I was thank you so much, babe. And he helped me set it up and do the whole thing. So I was this is a present, but it really is it's a love thing, because it's you need it for your podcast. We're going to make this podcast amazing. So that's the excitement in my life.
That's very cool. I have two microphones now. I definitely don't need another microphone. I just need to get a little stand. Yeah. So that way I could have it
because holding it, I feel I like to talk with my hands.
So do I.
And so do you. It's easier. You get your ass on Amazon and get a little mic stand. Look up whatever brand that you bought, because I'm sure they have mic stands specifically for that.
Oh yeah, they had a little one, but it's yay big. So where am I gonna put it? You know what I mean?
Mine is an arm, so
that's what I definitely need.
Yeah, because it just makes it so much easier. And then I don't know, because I worry about am I holding it enough? Where?
Oh yeah, I move mine around constantly. I'm that's probably really annoying. But but yeah, so that I got new covers for my headphones.
Slay, baby.
They're not disintegrating on me anymore.
Look at I literally peeled it off.
I saw that with our last interview. I saw that and I go, did she really just wear them like that? But I didn't bring it up.
I wish you brought it up because, and guys, go to YouTube and look at this. They were like peeling, so I peeled it off because I couldn't.
That's what I did, and
I couldn't get covers like coming quickly enough. And my mom, she ended up buying me new headphones, and I told her not to, but she's never gonna listen here. But she like buying me new ones for Christmas because James spilled the beans, and so I like didn't bother buying covers because I'm like whatever. So I'm just rocking them, and it looks like pretty gross.
it looked weird, not gonna lie. I was like,
100%. They're like yellow and foamy and weird, but I'm like, whatever.
Oh, I'm going on vacation in 1 week and 1 day.
Maddie I am like so fucking jealous. My agoraphobic ass is like, oh my God, you're traveling again. This is amazing. And then I'm like, I have hives.
Well, to keep it, because like I don't know when this one's coming out, probably not till February.
That's fine.
Right?
Yeah.
Probably somewhere around there.
They love hearing about our lives. It doesn't matter.
In a disorganized way because of the way that things
because that's us.
So, right. To keep it in context, it's December 15th, and I just got back from Mexico on December 4th. And so I'm leaving again.
This bitch.
23rd.
This bitch is like, I am booked and busy. Get my passport. We are off. I love that.
Yeah. So I'm going to St. Thomas. I haven't been there before. Little U.S. Virgin Islands. So I'm not technically leaving the country.
Right.
But I'm excited. Ordered some new bikinis. And
have they come yet?
They have. I need to try them on, but that's, you know, how that goes. Yeah. That's
100%. Especially look at my pale ass. Like trying to put on like a bikini in the winter. I'm like, oh girl, you look dead. I look dead.
I make a conscious effort to not be in the sun anymore.
Yeah.
And even when we were in Mexico, like when I tell you everyone has an umbrella when it's sunny out, everyone has an umbrella when it's sunny out because you don't want to get more sun on you. And my grandma had like a possible like cancerous spot on her head, from the sun.
Oh my God.
She wears a hat. Yeah, like everyone covers up a lot. So I feel pretty pale now because like I don't tan outside anymore. I've never been in a tanning bed. Like I don't do any of that. So like I'm feeling pretty pasty as well. Like
are you ever a self tanner?
No, because are there any like quote unquote funny we talked about this in the episode, but are there any like clean? Like I'm sure they're all like straight up Cancer USA in a bottle.
Yeah, I don't see. The thing is, I used to do like spray tans before like social things, and like we went to this woman's like home. She did it, and a lot of the girls at my high school always looked really orange, but the spray tan lady that we went to, she like hooked it up, and you looked you got like a good tan. Like it wasn't like holy shit. So I used to do that, and then I would either use like Saint-Tropez or like there's this one that like comes in a bottle and it's like mixed with coconut oil. So I like that one too. And it's not super crazy. Like if you miss a spot, it's not super obvious. It's not super dark because like that's, you know, we don't need it to be looking dark. But I haven't used it in forever because like not even like what is potentially in it, but just like hashtag lazy. Like I have to get James to like do my back, and then I got to, you know, you got to shave and exfoliate and the whole bit. I'm like,
yeah,
it's a lot. It's a lot. So
yeah, I don't have the energy. Like I just got into the routine of like tongue scraping, oil pulling. Like let me master the oral hygiene before I add on like fake tan. Like it's just a lot of work.
Literally, it's like the oral hygiene. Then we got to do the skincare. Then I'm shaving my face. Then I'm like making sure my skin isn't dry. And I'm like, I don't have time. Have time for the self tanner. But like, shout out to the people that are just like naturally glowy, because it ain't me.
Well, yeah, you have your genes going against
Look, I'm literally translucent. Like, hello, James. Literally yesterday, I visited him at work, and it's like really harsh overhead lights, and he goes, "You look translucent today," and he said it like so lovingly, and I was just like, "Bitch."
Do Do you glitter in the sun like a vampire?
Yes, I actually do. I forgot to tell you. No, but I'm
Uh,
like straight up translucent. I touch my skin, I get a rash. Like I literally scratched my arm. This is just me scratching
oh,
it. And like I'm like
oh.
purple. Like shout out to my family because my mom gets really tan and my dad gets pretty tan. And me and my sister now, um she lives in like a
Thailand?
tropical environment. So like she gets tan and then I'm like, hey
What
guys,
happened to you?
I think because my sister's just like in the sun every single day. So like her body just kind of changed, right? I don't know. My mom gets really tan because I don't know, but I think I don't know. My body is just like, we're not gonna get tan. And my friend hated her for this. She had a spray tan on and she literally goes, God, I didn't know how pale you were. I was like, bitch, you can't say that to me when you have a spray tan on. I was like, you also live in Florida. So like, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I'm like, it's literally gray outside. Like, who is the sun? Yeah. So I'm jealous you're traveling
Uh,
again and you're gonna put on a bikini and be all fabulous because I'm over here pale.
it's okay. You can live through me.
I am. So like those are like the updates I need from Maddie. She's like, booked the flight. Wait, no, I didn't. Got my points. And I'm just like, what is
I know.
happening?
Oh God, you cracked me up.
Yep. So
Anyway, but
I
yeah,
think that is a good catch up. Do you
yes.
feel like you have said everything you needed to
I
say?
feel like I've said my piece. Let's get on with the show.
So we are so excited to have Justine here. We all have been internet friends for, quite some time now, and hopefully you're excited to be here too.
I am. I'm very excited. Yeah.
We just kidnapped her and we're like, we don't really care if you're excited. You're just like gonna be on the podcast.
No, but as soon as you guys started like advertising it, I was like, hi, have me on. I like to talk.
Well, great, because we all do, and then so Allie more than I even, and she has a hard stop. I'm gonna really try to keep her to it. I'm the one that has to do that around here.
I know. My hard
'Cause
stop is like, I have to go, but we have 5 more minutes and it's
free
like
time.
that is always my vibe. I can't shut up. But we wanted to have you on because one, we've like known you, you have your own podcast. I love listening to it. Like if I have like long car rides, I'm queuing up podcasts and your podcast is one of them and we're going to put it in the show notes below so that people can listen. And it's called The Villain Era and I
Mhm.
love that. Like so everything that like encapsulates you. So we wanted to have you on because we have, similarities in the fact that like we're coaches online. We have all gone through something where we needed to pivot in like our own health and fitness. And I just love your energy. And like you talk a lot, we talk a lot. So it's like a perfect guest to have on because it's like just all girlfriends hanging out and like that's the vibe.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. So when did you kind of with your podcast, I want you to explain to the audience like like how was that born? Because I feel like that's such an important part of like we know everything about you, but like how you came into this part of your life. Because I would say like this is your era where you are just like shining and it's been so amazing to watch that transition happen, like being in the different, circles that we're in.
Um, you're gonna make me cry right now. Like I'm like tearing up. Yeah, because honestly, the podcast has been such a passion project for me. I thought about doing a podcast for so long and I had so many business coaches telling us we should get on YouTube or we should do this. And I don't really watch YouTube. So I would like make a video here and then I had no passion around it, but I've always loved podcasting. And then I always felt that if I was going to podcast, it had to be something that was a fitness podcast or it had to be something that was going to propel my business, right? Like otherwise, why was I doing this? And I even had ideas where I was like, oh, maybe like I could do a podcast like with my brother or all of this stuff. And the mentor I was working with at the time was like, well, no, why would you do anything that isn't helping your business? And then finally, I went through a massive just massive life change. So I was in a very emotionally and verbally and sexually, honestly, abusive relationship. And I finally left. And it was, years of being in a lot of denial over how bad the relationship was. And it was just something that really slowly started to dim me and take away who I was. And when I left, it was finally like, wow, so many of my friends were just like, we're seeing Justine again. Like, we're seeing the person that was our best friend, and we're seeing the things that we loved about you. And he was really in a spot where the things other people loved about me, he hated about me. And he would really try to pull those back. And, he didn't want me online at all. He didn't want me going to the gym. He didn't want me, he wanted me to move into a much more like traditional lifestyle. And so then finally, when I left and I started to, I think one of the things that I'm not always the best at this, but trying to talk about your scars instead of your scabs. So I gave it a little bit of time and then really started to talk about things. And it was such a way for me to heal just by telling my story. And this is actually a conversation I really had with my therapist about, I didn't tell people what was going on in my life. I had one friend who had an idea about how bad it was, but for instance, like my family, because when I left my marriage, my family was very much like, well, you need to go back. You need to go figure this out, or you need to go and talk to him in person. I'll talk a lot. I had thought about leaving for a long time, and I was only married 13 months before I left. So it's kind of embarrassing that I thought about leaving for a long time. But when I left, we had gotten in a whole bunch of fights. He had bought me multiple plane tickets, and I got all the way to, basically, I was in New York, New Jersey, where you can take the train. I got all the way to like the train to the airport, and then I wouldn't get on the flight. And this was, 2 times that happened. And then finally, I just got on a flight. I came home. I brought 2 suitcases. I left all of my stuff. And so when I got back, at first my mom was like, you need to go back and you're going to have to face him. And my dad told me that I should be embarrassed that I had a wedding and all of these things. And then as soon as I started telling them what was happening, they were like, you cannot go back there. Like, we are worried about your safety. You might want to call the police when you go back. And so I had talked to my therapist about finally telling people what was happening. And she was like, Justine, this is all a form of protection. You weren't telling people because that protected you at the time from the way he would have reacted in your relationship. And now you're finally telling people, and it's a form of protection in the fact that no one's going to let you go back to that now, where you can really understand, like, they're going to know what's going on. So if you try to go back, they're going to be like, absolutely not. So going into the podcast and sharing that was definitely super healing for me. I know, and I know this isn't the same for everyone, because I have a friend who got divorced similarly, and she was talking about how when she talks about her divorce, she feels like she's having to relive a lot of the conversations. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. She was talking about how feels like that makes her like relive, and it brings up a lot of trauma. Versus for me, when I talk about it, it doesn't bring up necessarily that trauma, but it allows me to, I felt very healed moving through it. And then just finding myself again, going out and figuring out, I was 32. I moved back home with my mom. I was very broke, and kind of figuring out like, what am I going to do? Because this definitely isn't what I planned my life to look like at 32. And then realizing that there were a lot of women who had been in the same position as me. And my DMs and the messages were just so many people saying, thank you for sharing this, and thank you for, being brave enough to put this out there, and people reaching out to me and saying like, I felt this way too. So it's just been a really awesome way to connect with people and share that I am a lot more than someone who tracks their macros and goes to the gym every day. And understanding too, I think, weaving in a little bit how that is so affected in our health, because being in toxic relationships and being in toxic environments is going to be such a determining factor on how we feel every day. So that's really where the podcast started. And then I shared a lot about dating and moving and just trying all sorts of new things in my life. And it's been a really fun adventure.
I love like everything about that because it gives people like a little preview of who you are. And it is such your story is so incredible because for so many people, I feel like the idea of like completely starting over is really scary. And you had to go through that and you came out on the other side just in such a better place and healthier and happier and safe. And it just goes to show like this is a great example of how we can overcome like some crazy ass shit and it can get better. It's not right away. I mean, I'm sure you had those moments where you're like, was this a good fucking decision? Like, what the fuck just happened? And so I love that you can share that and you do it in a way that is so safe. And I think that's just amazing. And like, you're so much more than just like, I'm a health coach. Like, we do shit with a purpose. And I love that.
Yeah, when I first left, I just randomly had a therapy session for the day after, and I got on there and I said, did I just screw up my entire life? I was like, did I just fuck up my whole life? And she said, Justine, you gave your life the only chance it has. Because again, even at that point, she was like, if at this point, I was one day from leaving, she's like, if you decide to go back, you really put a line that the relationship cannot go forward in this way. But also if you, choose to not, which I obviously didn't, and that was by far the best choice, you're giving your life the only chance. So it was really, really powerful.
If you're kind of explaining everything, do you think there was a part of you, like even how you brought up going to your therapist the day after, which couldn't have been like better timing? Do you think there could have been a part of you when you were finding yourself so low of going back because it was kind of like you knew the devil, so to speak? You knew what you're going back to. You could kind of like maybe mitigate as best you could, but it was better than kind of being in this scary new world.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's part of why I stayed so long. And I also know that one of the major things that has changed for me outside of the easy, obvious life things is my view on relationships and love and that type of thing. And so I would say I grew up in a place where my parents were divorced. I really didn't see any happy marriages until I would say the last couple years in my life. And so I just always had a thought that I was always going to settle. I never really seemed like growing up, I never was a girl who dreamed about her wedding or dreamed about like the love of my life. I didn't really think that was something that I believed in. And that's something that has changed so drastically for me, where I was like, if I'm going to do this again, I'm going to really, really be in love and I'm going to deserve that. And I know that I can find that. And so part of, why I went through with the wedding is I was just like, well, everyone settles a little bit, or this is just, he's chosen me, so he's going to show up for me and like that will be good enough. And one of the things that was really struggled with is like, well, if I'm just better, right? Like if I just keep the house cleaner, or if I just, when he gets into his like moods, if I just don't, argue back, if I just let myself be a punching bag and then we'll get through it. And it was kind of like, well, I'm strong enough to be that punching bag and like I'll be okay. And then honestly, there was just a couple days where, one, things really started to escalate towards threats of physical violence. And it definitely got to a point of, I was like, I'm like, this is going to get really bad if I stay. And then also I just remember we were in the car and we were pulling out of the gas station and like he was texting and someone was coming around and I was like, and I like, cause I thought we were going to hit the other car, and he just started screaming at me and he was like, I just remember he's like, you are such a dumb fuck. Like, excuse my language, but like you
could swear on here, it's fine.
You are such a dumb fuck. You're so fucking stupid. Like, I'm driving, we're not gonna get hit. I've never been in. And he's just like screaming at me in the car in the passenger seat. And I just really remember thinking, what would I like if someone was talking to my sister this way? I would be like, get the fuck out. I would get her stuff and get her out of there. So why am I letting myself be spoken to this way? And that was like one of the things. There was a couple things right before I left that. And then we were in a movie theater and it was quiet and he started calling me a bitch, and I was like, people, like, it was kind of in public, so I was like, people are hearing this, like, and I was so embarrassed by it, and it just got to a point where I really started to see, I'm like, I would never let any of my friends go through this, so why am I letting myself?
Yeah, that's
now.
yeah.
Or go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that is so true that in any like part of your life, how many times have we like said in our own head, why am I talking about myself this way or letting myself be in this position when I wouldn't let anybody that I cared about do that? So it is such a moment of like, why am I treating myself like a piece of shit? Like, why am I allowing that for myself? And sometimes that's really, really a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. And then the final straw, honestly, was he, you know, to that point, I had started to leave. This is a trigger warning, right? But a few days before I had left, again, we had been fighting a lot, and we were living at his parents because we had just moved from Miami, and he had gone to sleep in his sister's room, and I was sleeping in the other sister's room. Well, not like it was their room, so growing up, right? They didn't live there anymore. And we had this huge fight, and he came in and literally held my arms down, and he wanted to have sex, and I was crying, and it was one of those things where it was just like, I just know, I was like, no, no, no. And finally it was like, if I just say yes, this will be over way quicker than if I continue to fight it. And then he ended up coming inside me, and I was in my ovulation window. And the next day I was like, I'm going to take plan B. That was not how I'm going to bring a child into this world, all of this stuff. And he was like, my wife is not allowed to take plan B. I am a religious person, which that's a whole other topic. And that was just like, so I was just like, I can't believe, like, I'm like, I'm sitting here crying, and you're just like, yeah. And so that was kind of like a ending. And then he sent me a text message that had a list of demands. And a lot of the demands were, I would start religious studies and I would convert. We would start trying to have a child right away. If he didn't want to go somewhere, we didn't go. If he wanted to leave, I would say yes and leave whenever he wanted to leave. I would stop trying to collaborate on things, and if he gave me a task to do, I would do it and handle it on my own, and then I would do all of it with a smile on my face. And I literally, it was 10 p.m. and I booked a flight for 10 a.m. the next morning, and I was packed so I was like, I'm out. Like, I am so out. So
Now, and we can take this out if it's like too much to ask. It's more just, I'm not trying to pry, but I'm curious. It's super, I mean, I can only imagine being able to talk about these things. So like how you said it was so hard to tell like your friends, to tell your family what was going on. Talking about it in a public way is, I'm sure, 10,000 times harder. Now, I know this is probably not something he would want for it to be out, and you guys have kind of, you know that too. How are you still like talking about it? I'm just curious.
Oh, I think that there's been a lot of times where I've thought about, so yeah, he is not happy with this, but I have text messages to basically back up any story I want, because he has threatened me a lot with lawsuits. And I have all of these text messages. I have a text message of him saying he forced himself on me. And I have, a lot of it, again, it was so embarrassing. Like, I remember walking home one night and I just started crying and told my best friend about it because I had never told them about that. But it's something where I've gone to a lot of therapy, and I know that me telling my story has helped so much, and I don't feel like it's something that really brings me down anymore. But I got an email yesterday about the things that were said in my podcast.
Wow.
And I also got, and I mean, I have him blocked on everything. But email you can't really block.
Right.
So if they make a new email, also it just goes to spam. And then I actually had a woman reach out to me recently as well who has dated him since. And her story just sounded so similar to things that I went through. And then she ended up finding my podcast, which that actually made me feel a little unsafe because we don't have the same last name. I never changed my last name. There's no connection of us on social media. So I was like, how the hell did you find me and know? Because obviously I don't say names or anything like that. I'm like, how did you find me and know who I was talking about? But she reached out to me. And at first I was like really sketched out about it because I was just like, who is this girl? All of this stuff. And then she told me this story where so many things aligned. And then at the end of it, she was just like, thank you so much for sharing this online. I feel less alone now. And I had actually been thinking about taking some of these episodes down because part of me was like, I talked to my therapist, like, were we just oil and water, right? Like, were we just never going to work? And am I keeping him from maybe finding someone who has similar values to him that things could work out? And then I got that message and I was like, no. Like, if he was showing that he was changing, that girl wouldn't have had those issues. She wouldn't have had to come and try and find me. So it's like one of those things where I do just kind of check in with myself and say, okay, do I feel safe sharing this? Is this bringing peace into my life? And one day maybe I will take it down. There are some episodes of the podcast I have taken down just because I am working a little bit more of like I freelance for some corporate companies and I am going to start working at like a corporate gym. So there are some episodes where I just talked about like doing DMT and things like that. I was like, maybe we'll take those down for now. But it's like one of those things where I get to control it, right? And I think that's the big thing is I'm in control of what's shared and there's no connection. There's no things that he can hold over my head or things like that, which for a long time, like money was something that was trying to hold over my head in order to kind of listen to him. And that's not really something he can continue to hold over me. So, I don't know. I feel in a weird way too. I think just podcasting feels like a safe space again, because it's my like personal passion project. And, I don't know. Podcasting has felt very safe and cathartic to me, even versus social media or Instagram or anything like that.
Oh, I 1000%
I
agree. And
Yeah.
I think it's so powerful that you get to share your story, which happened to you, and you have the receipts to show it in the way that feels best for you. And it's a little bit like therapy, like you're talking through these things. And I mean, you just saved that woman's life basically, because if he is comfortable screaming at his spouse in public in front of other people and also assaulting his spouse, like I'm sure he's comfortable with way worse things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there is part of me that'll still feels bad. And there's part of me that if I could have an outcome to this, it would be that he would go to therapy and he would get help and he wouldn't I would hope that he would figure this out and go through and end up having a very happy life and like, I don't want him to be miserable and making other people miserable for the rest of his life. But also, and to the point, I think if someone met him and he was showing that he changed, everyone does get their side of the story, right? I'm sure he can come and say, I think, well, this isn't how I felt about it, but ultimately this is my truth. So,
and that's, you speak about it in such a way that like, it just like, I get chills like as you're talking because you were in such an abusive and unsafe environment that now to see where you are and how you are able to talk and share, it is so powerful because you had this space where you had no power, no control, and now you're taking that back and you're owning it. And like with podcasting, I agree, it is such an experience where you get to share your story, you get to talk about the things you want to talk about without being like censored. Like social media is going to block certain things or whatnot. And it feels like a space where people are more judgmental versus like on the podcast. Like people really got to go out of their way to be like leaving like shit comments and whatnot. So I love your love for podcasting because I feel like so similar. Like when I'm hearing people share their stories or Maddie and I are talking about like really, deep things and things that are vulnerable to us, it's like we're in our bubble. We feel safe telling this. So that's another really cool thing about your journey is you're choosing to share it and document it. And like you said, take things down if you want, keep things up that you want. Like you're in the control seat, which must feel so incredible because you get to share a really big part of your life that you weren't for so long.
Yeah. And one of the other things I share a lot about on my podcast is sex.
Yeah.
And so I was definitely in a relationship where I can't tell you the last time I wanted to have sex, obviously, the way things were going.
Yeah.
And I had been in that relationship. I mean, we were together almost 6.5 years, so a very long time. And so then starting to enjoy sex again, I think, honestly, that was one of the first things I just remember that I had the first time I had sex with someone else. I laid in that bed and I was just like, I'm not broken and I'm way too young to be having bad sex. And so it's been like this whole journey. I've gotten very graphic on my podcast, which I've gotten some hate for. So I told a story about how I licked a man's asshole. And then I got a lot of like, I had people doing like those anonymous boxes, like any other guy's buttholes lately and like trying to like call me out on that. And I was like, go listen to the podcast. But those are things that you can't talk about on social media. I've had a lot of things where I'm trying to share clips of my podcast, and anything you talk about like that, it just gets, like, for lack of a better word, shadow banned. So being able to speak on these things, that I think that's something too that so many women do struggle with. And I think that it's kind of silly. There's so many men out here who want to make jokes about, oh, another woman with a sex and dating podcast. And I'm like, if you think if all of these women were coming out with sex and dating podcasts, maybe it's a sign that we are struggling with sex and that you guys just aren't, like, you guys are not like fulfilling us. And we got to give everyone tips because all these women have it and they all connect over it. And that's obviously like a sign that there's a little bit of a revolution there with that. And being able to speak on those things that social media is just going to block, I think, is another great opportunity.
I mean,
100%.
when you think about it, who is more sexually free? Men. And
yeah.
It's like,
we
are just I don't even know if you had like a graph, like how much of a difference it is. Like, we're not even up halfway there. So of course we're going to talk about it more because we're becoming more free with it. And, even like thinking like to my childhood, like we, and Mom, if you're listening, highly doubt you are, but like, just don't listen right now. But like, she never talked about anything. If you brought up a boy, my mom would be like, her face automatically, like, never talked anything about it. So like, for me, I have a lot of like shame around sex and like thinking about it, talking about it. Like, I don't like talking about it with my sister. Like, it's still something I'm working on, but I'll listen to like people talk about it all the time. Like, oh yeah, that's great, that's cool, whatever, I want to listen to it, but like talking about it, that's another story.
And it's so funny because like, so many men, like, there are probably a percentage of like guys that don't want to talk about sex, or they maybe feel awkward or whatever, but like, I think it is really freeing when like a group of women can get together and like talk about sex, because it is such a thing that like on social media you can't talk about it, or like people may judge you or think like, oh my God, like that's insane or that's too much. And it's like, no, it's not though, because all these men out here doing all these like quote unquote like crazy things, and it's like, yeah, man, but it's like, no, like, let's hold some fucking same energy and like express yourself and have no judgment, because like what happens in my bedroom is like really none of your business. And like, I'm gonna do my thing. And it's just, I love that you have like, I've listened to, you had an episode with Kylie and I was like fucking dying. I was like, iconic, amazing. And I'm like listening to it in the car as I'm driving, and I'm like,
yeah. So the episode where I was on her podcast, I was very very open. And it's funny because my brother and my sister will not listen to my podcast. They think that it's kind of like reading my journal, or just obviously things they don't want to hear about, which I've actually tried to get them to listen to it, because I was like, listen, there are episodes that I actually think would maybe help you hear. I mean, I talked to them about it, but I do think that they're easy episodes that I'm not talking about those kind of things. But I literally talked about a guy slapping me in the face with his dick on Kylie's episode. And then my brother my brother won't listen to my podcast, but he was like, oh, she's a guest, and went and listened to that episode. And then he called up my sister and was like, you need to listen to this. And then she was like, I'm not going to listen to it. And she tried to make my brother-in-law listen to it. I was like, guys, you don't ever listen to my podcast. And now that's what you're going to go listen to.
Are your siblings younger than you or older than you?
They're both younger.
Okay.
But my sister's 3 years younger, but she is very different than me.
Okay.
She, I would say, is a little bit more reserved. You guys have seen my podcast cover where it's like me without a shirt on and my
it's hot. Yeah.
She did not approve of that. And she's married, she owns a house, has a kid, so obviously in a very different life space than me. My brother's 6 years younger than me, and he's probably a little bit more aligned with like the things I'm doing. But yeah, so I mean, for a while I was living with my sister, and it was kind of interesting to her to start seeing me go on all these dates and not coming home at night and like starting to talk about these stories. So it was actually kind of a very interesting way for us to start talking about those things a little bit more too. But yeah, they listened to that episode and it was a wild one.
Oh my God. I am like gagged because my sister wouldn't mind me saying this, but she came out as queer like during the pandemic, and she was going through just a lot of, new experiences, whatever. And we like growing up, we like never really like talked about like we didn't show affection a lot in our household. Like it was always like to my mom, like love you, but like never really hug my dad, never really like talk about certain things. And then as she's going through this experience, spilling the tea on all these stories, and she's like, how do you think I interpret this? Blah, 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 blah. And it just was like awesome to see her have this experience and to like come into her own, but then to also just like hear these fucking stories. I was like, dude, that is insane. Because I've been in a relationship for 8 years and I'm just like living through. I'm like, that is fucking insane. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, but I support this like fully. Like, this is iconic. So it's kind of it's interesting to like how those sibling dynamics like change over time, and you went through this new experience, my sister goes through this new experience, and it like kind of brings you closer in a way, but it's also like,
oh, we're closer than we've ever been. Yeah,
I love that.
Aww.
That's awesome.
And then speaking to kind of the way we grew up, so my mom was 17 when she had me. So when I was in high school, I was very much like, I am not having sex. Like if I have sex, I will follow down this path. And I didn't end up having sex until I was a sophomore in college, and I was in an actual relationship. And so that was something that like really shaped me, and definitely I got teased a little bit about in high school and things like that. And I don't regret my choices at all, but that was just something where I was like, I don't want to have sex. I don't want to have kids. Like I saw what happened to my mom, and like I was just like, that is not going to be me. And I was also very like a good kid, like 4.0, like never got grounded anything. So that really shaped kind of how I thought about sex, and to the point so many women I think of it as something that is done to us versus us being an active participant in it, and also just not having those conversations about how it's not bad that sex is for pleasure, right? Like,
right.
It doesn't have
I've
to
never
be
heard
just,
that before.
Yeah.
Well, even it's like
just have a baby.
Right. Like, and it's your brain from a young age, like correlated. Oh, my mom had sex and had me young. So like, if I have sex, I'm going to have a baby, which is one thing that can happen, but that's not the only thing. But it is like from a young age, it's like for a lot of people, that is the correlation that you have. Or like, oh, you're a slut. Oh, you're a lame virgin. Like, it's like three things. And it's like, well, where's the actual pleasure? Like, and I guess, at a young age, you're not maybe thinking like that, but it just, some people carry it into adulthood still. And it's like, man, that is like rough. If you're just having sex because that's like a duty, it's like, fuck that. I got a good vibrator. Like,
oh, it's funny. One thing I did want to ask, when you were like at your lowest, right? Which was probably just, it probably felt like it was happening for the longest time, because I'm sure you didn't wake up one day and think, okay, now I feel shitty. You probably felt shitty in your marriage for a good amount of time. How like how hard was it to like still prioritize your health in any capacity? Because I'm sure it was really hard.
Yeah. So before I left, I would say I really just almost hid myself in that. So I was so into, I was working with Alyssa and Gillis actually, and I was going there through their protocols, and I had done my own blood work, and I had no cortisol, my progesterone was really low, I had no testosterone. And so I was every day, I would wake up and I would see the sunlight, and I would go journal, and then I would meditate, and then I read like 28 books last year, well, 2 years ago, because all of that was like an escape for me, like to go
Mm.
work out, to go on my walks, to go to the gym. I was like, this is a way for me to get away and escape and try and like put myself into a good mindset. And obviously, nothing was necessarily improving because of that. And then and I was also very like, I was still gluten and dairy free. I was only shopping at Whole Foods, all of this stuff. I was very in that functional realm to try and help myself heal. And then when I left, I was actually working with Kelsey, who I know you guys just had on, and she was my coach. And we really just focused on going on a walk. She gave me workouts that were like cat, cow, bird, dog, some body weight. And it was just like, if you can do this 20 minutes, that's it.
Yeah.
And the hardest thing for me, which honestly, I feel like I struggled with this for probably over a year, was I had no appetite. And so
Mm.
I was forcing myself to eat. I would just make myself eat like spoonfuls of peanut butter, or I would make sure that I was having like at least 2 scoops of my protein shake a day. But that was a really struggle, like a huge struggle was just to have an appetite regularly. And so I knew the things that helped me feel better, especially were going on walks. I mean, that's something that I threw myself into. And I know enough to try and force myself to eat even when I wasn't hungry. And then trying my best. Also, I would say that I slept a lot. I was like, you know what? Like my body wants to sleep. I'm going to sleep a lot. And so those were definitely the things with health and fitness that I tried to at least show up for myself. I think things like water is something that I'm never going to struggle with. And knowing that at least if I do these things, I'm going to feel somewhat better. And I think thankfully I had a lot of the habits instilled in me. So it wasn't like I was trying to create new habits throughout this time, which was really helpful. But doing all of that was just like moving my body. And I think that's probably what helped me also heal through all of it, is being really aware when like things did show up in my body and, how I would feel around certain things. But yeah, I mean, through all of it, like I definitely quit going to the gym for a while, but I really never quit doing things for myself in that regard.
That's
I think it's
super
okay.
important. No, you're good. But I'm just that part, like, of not quitting on like doing the good things. Like you make adjustments, but like I'm going to show up for myself. That's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
I think it's worth noting on that when you were going through, because I kind of like vaguely remember you going through your hormone journey and trying to improve those, but like none of us were in the light of what was happening. So you have these two things where you're doing all of these things for your health, like you said, walking, prioritizing getting sunlight, workouts, only organic whole foods, at Whole Foods, and really prioritizing like all the things in that direction. But no matter what you were doing, your life was so stressful and your body was just in such a, fight or flight state that it didn't matter how hard you went with the health side. It was never going to catch up until you finally left, right?
And I was telling Gillis, who he was going through my blood work with me, and I was telling him all the things I do. I said, I journal, I meditate, I ground, I see sunlight. And he was like, okay, but when you do these things, do you actually feel relaxed, or are you adding more stress when you do those things? And I was like, no, I actually do feel relaxed, because again, those were like my escapes. But obviously I wasn't telling him, well, 2 hours later, I'm getting screamed at. And
Yeah.
So that was obvious. Yeah.
And that's also so hard because like you're going through this protocol and you're working really hard, but then there's also a part of you that like it does not feel safe to be totally
No.
honest. And that's such a hard thing in so many areas of like life. Like I know in my journey, like it does not feel safe a lot of the times to express the amount of anxiety that I have, and like if I'm having a panic attack, because people are like, just breathe, just calm down. And so it's so hard to heal in a space or even work on yourself when there are areas where it's like, I can't be honest because it doesn't feel safe. And so you're like doing all this work and you're for your hormones, and it's like, well, fuck, like nothing is actually getting better.
Yeah, and I think the big, like, if I think of kind of the big three symptoms I was going through, is like, one, I was taking a nap almost every single day, like around like 2, 3 o'clock. I was crashing. I was so tired. I had no sex drive at all. And then I had a very, very light period. I was having spotting, and then I was in a very light period. And so I was taking chaseberry and licorice root, and I was taking a testosterone supplement and all of these things. And then honestly, I left and I stopped taking all the supplements. I stopped doing all of this stuff. I actually didn't need a protocol by any means. And now I have a quite extensive sex drive. I have a very easy period. I basically have no, it's like 4 days. I have no symptoms. It's very easy for me. And for the most part, I have great energy. I make it through the day. And I actually didn't need all of these supplements. I didn't need all of this stuff. I just needed to the point put myself in a space where my body felt safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so it just makes you have to be more aware, and it makes people like really think. Like I want you to listen to this and think that like supplements or a certain workout protocol or different things, like it is not going to like fix the issue. We have to make sure we're like looking at our environment and looking at our bodies as a whole, and how can we listen to what's happening. Because, and I work with Kelsey in like right now, and we focus on sometimes like my workouts are kind of similar to the things that you were doing. And it's because going to the gym and putting more stress on your body just for a certain result is not going to fix whatever you've got going on. So I love that you also had support in that way while you're going through this big life change, that you weren't feeling forced to have to show up 100% for yourself in the way of like intensity. But you're like, I'm showing up for me in a way that feels really caring and feels really nurturing, which is huge.
And I think the other thing I wanted to touch on as well is kind of like the food aspect, is where I was eating so clean and all of, for lack of a better term, clean. But I really, in a way, rebounded from that because, one, I was living at my mom's, and then I was living at my cousin's, and then I didn't have a car. So that was an area where I was like, I can't be just going to Whole Foods in the farmer's market. Like I need to do what's going to keep me to survive. I think secondly, it is such an expense to eat that way. And divorce, leaving your main, leaving the person who is like the main breadwinner, that's a huge monetary thing. I could not continue to keep paying that for food and try and also pay for a divorce lawyer and everything. And then third, just also realizing like, okay, well, where would I really like to find that balance in my life? And as much as I think that I rebounded and kind of went the other way, I still think I'd probably, I still know I'm better than like, I wasn't eating the standard American diet or anything. I just went to like more frozen vegetables, and like I added Greek yogurt back in, and like just got the Greek yogurt Chobani, not the one that has literally nothing added into it. And I think that it's just important to understand that you're going to go through cycles in life where I was like, I could not care about that. And then finally now I would say I'm back to a place where I can kind of decide like, okay, this is where I am going to choose to buy better products and find my own balance with that. Because I think like the functional health space of fear mongering ingredients and stuff can just be so detrimental. And I think that there is some sort of balance there of, okay, I don't buy fragrance in my body wash, but I still wear perfume. Or like, I don't buy, I still eat Cheez-Its every day, but like, I also do buy like dairy-free, vegan-free protein powders, and kind of finding where that balance sits for me in whatever state of life you're into.
I can 1000% relate to this because I've been working on my autoimmune almost a year now. It'll be a year. This is the last month of the year, so since January. And I definitely get into funks where, we get new blood work or a new test done. And then, right before, a little bit before Mexico, I had this extensive food, like allergy testing done. And I had to cut all these foods out. And I was like, Alyssa, how am I going to go to Mexico for 5 weeks? Like, I have some control over what we're eating, but this is a lot. Like, I can't eat anything. And she was like, don't worry, it's just a phase. We will get through to where you can eat more food. And thankfully we did. But I do go through these periods where I can't, like right now, like the only milk I can have is coconut milk, and it sucks because like almond milk's so much easier to get and it's way cheaper. And I'm like, I can't wait till I don't have to only buy coconut milk. But I can see myself going through periods where I am fixating on every ingredient, every fragrance, everything. And then it's like, I just want to go in the whole other direction, be like, F it, I don't care. Because I'm tired. No one can hold that level of attention to everything they're consuming and, microanalyzing everything. Like, you're going to get worn out. It's going to happen. And then you're going to go poop the other way. And it's going to be a hard fall in that direction.
Yeah. And even before I went through my hormone journey, so probably at least 2.5 years ago now, I went through a gut health healing journey, and I had candida, I had H. pylori, I had bacterial overgrowths. And so that was another time where I really went into paleo diet, but I cut out eggs, I cut out any nuts. To your point, I would only have coconut milk and couldn't have any kind of xanthan gum or anything in it. And I just remember for so long, I was like, am I never going to be able to have like pizza night, like with my kids or something like that? And that was so hard. But now actually, and I used to have serious gut issues. Like, I would be either constipated, or then when I had to go to the bathroom, I was running because then it was going to like be diarrhea. It was just like very bad. And the other day, my sister was like, my boyfriend, she's like, does he know you're stinky? And I was like, well, I'm not really stinky anymore. Like, like if I do eat pizza, or like if I do have like a lot of cheese, like that doesn't sit well with me. But I was like, I mean, it's been 4 months and there's been no time that has come up where I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go to the bathroom. So it is kind of nice to know that I have definitely healed some things there. I'm like,
are you stinky?
Yeah, I'm like, we're 4 months in and I don't think he's heard me fart. So
That is so funny. It is like it's so interesting to like also look back and like where you're at in this like healthy relationship. Like, you're putting yourself first. You have your idea of like, this is what balance looks like. And then thinking back to like your marriage, that like your body was just in this mode of like, we are unsafe and we are creating all of these problems. And no matter what you do, we are going to be stinky and we are not going to be feeling good. And it's just crazy to be able to watch that journey, because I'm sure, if you think back to like when you were married, you're like, this is it. Like this is what we're doing. Like, this is my life. And that's so fucking awesome, because I mean, there are people in my life that I sometimes think of and I'm like, they have just been together for so long that I feel like they think it's like just their default. Like, they have to be in that relationship. And so like, what would you say if somebody was like, I'm not super happy, but it's okay. It's not a terrible relationship, but it's not great. I mean, we've been together for so long. What would your advice be? No, being that you could have stayed and just been like, I'll just settle.
Yeah. Well, I think it's different because I very much was in a terrible relationship.
Yeah, totally.
But I think that the biggest thing you have to ask yourself is, are you asking for what you want? That would be my first step is, are you asking for it? Or are you, especially because I used to try to be like the chill girl, or, oh, I don't want to start a fight. I don't want to have any confrontation. So I think the first step is just, you have to ask this person if they can't read your mind, right? So going in and saying, hey, I really want this. I really want to try this, or, you know, I'm really lacking here, and understanding that one, I think this is something I really have to, I would say I'm still working through, is that confrontation doesn't mean a person's going to leave you. That is hard for me. Like if I bring up a fight, then, well, they're just going to break up with me. So I think understanding that if that's the way someone is, then you deserve better than that, right? But understanding that confrontation can be a way to actually grow in a relationship, and asking, again, just saying, hey, I need this, or I need that. And I've had a couple instances like with my boyfriend of saying like, hey, you know, I need you to send this text, or I just need you to like do this. And it's been met easily, and like the differences have been made in showing up. And then I think you get to then make the choice of saying, okay, well, if they're not willing to compromise with me, if they're not willing to show up for me, you know, life is really long. And I think that even though it took me almost as long as I was married to get divorced, but I would still go through that 100 times, even if that meant I only had 5 years left, because that's 5 years of amazingness that I could literally rather be alone than in a relationship that brings you down. And so that would just be my first thing, is say, you know, what do you want, and are you asking for that? Because if you're not asking for it, how are you going to get it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And Maddie and I have talked about this either on the podcast or just like texting, but like women in particular are so afraid to ask for what they want. And when you said like if I bring up confrontation, I'm afraid somebody like will leave or break up with me. And that is a trauma that I am still working through. And like, I say it to James all the time. I'm like, I just need to know that like, it's okay. And he's like, it is. And I'm like, I get pulled back into like this moment of like it not being okay. And so just expressing that, like, it can be scary to express those things, but you're so right. If you don't voice what you need, it's never going to be met. And a great partner will not just abandon you, right? Like, I'm so happy that you're in this relationship where you're shining and you're happy and you're like, oh my God, like, this is none of these little things I'm bringing up are like crazy demands. It's just part of a normal, healthy relationship.
Yeah, we had our first fight, and we were on the phone actually, and I just went I said, do you still want to be with me?
Oh,
like that was and he was just like, what? Like, you know, and then we were kind of in the heat of it, and we both actually agreed. We were like, let's talk, like, I'm like, let's talk later. Like, I was like really upset. I'm like, I don't even know what to say right now. And he ended up calling back like 15 minutes later and was like, I just want to apologize. And he like told me, it's like, I called back because you were asking if I even wanted to be with you. And he was like, that wasn't the thing. Like, I definitely did not want to break up. But then I talked to my therapist out of it, and she was like, yeah, you probably scared the shit out of him, thinking, oh my God, are we breaking up? And he was not on that page at all. Yeah. And I was like, well, that's just like my gut instinct. And then going through that first fight, it made me like him even more, to see the way both of us did kind of say, hey, you know, it was really hard because I'm someone who wants to just talk it out and figure it out. And like, I have so much trouble sleeping if I'm in like a confrontation with someone, but we both were kind of like, let's like chill out, take some space, and we'll come back to this and talk like tomorrow. And then when we did talk about it, like the communication was very there. It was apologetic. It was like, how do we move forward from this? And I was just like, wow, this feels great that something can come up and we can talk through it. And it's not just going to be, because also too, so we ended up not talking about it for like 2 days, and he came over to my place, and my first instinct, because this is how I handle things in my marriage, was to just brush it under the rug. Like, I was just like, you know, what if I just don't bring it up? What if I just like act like obviously, like, we had the fight, we got over it, we're not in the fight right now, I could just not bring it up. And so that was my first instinct, and I was like, no, I know I can't do this, I have to talk about it. And I think that the hardest part was just those first few words to bring up the conversation. Like, just sitting there and thinking about like, okay, how do I bring this up? And then like once we opened the conversation, it was very easy to go back and forth and like talk about things. But it was like, it's like the saying like the heaviest weight is just the opening the gym door, right? Like that's just where just getting that conversation, the hardest part to me. And then like once it was open, it felt so much easier.
Oh, I struggle with that too. Like, I don't want to talk about things. That's the biggest thing for us is just getting the conversation started about something and then just being comfortable to express your needs. And like the quote Lacey told us, I don't know how long ago this was. I tell every single client this when I first start them, and Allie knows exactly what I'm saying. But an unsaid need is an unmet need.
Yeah.
And like I will scream that from the rooftops because I can't read your brain. I don't know what you want. And if you don't tell me how, then if you're going to be upset that I didn't do that, I never knew about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even just this week, my boyfriend and I, we do a lot of like interesting things. He's a comedian and he used to be a race car driver. And so like we do all these like weird things. But like this week I was like, hey, it's been a minute since we like went to a restaurant. And he's like, oh, well, you don't count all of this other stuff as dates. And I was like, you know, that's nice. But I was like, I want to go to a restaurant, like look cute and do this. And literally I brought this up on Sunday. On Tuesday, he took me to a restaurant. So it was like, you know, just like bringing up, he would have never known that
Right.
was something that I wanted had I not just said it.
And then imagine how women spend years and years and years of building that resentment until one day they're like, you never took me to a restaurant. It's been 15 years and I freaking hate you. Do you know what I mean? That's the recipe right there.
Yeah. And no, the need being met, like that, like, and I'm gonna keep saying this, but that makes me so happy for you that you're like, I put something out there and it was totally well received, and it was like, all right, great, let's like I'm gonna plan a date because you deserve that. Like,
and I will share too, I have definitely not been like perfect in this relationship, like especially for a little bit. I was like, he is going to break up with me. He is going to break up with me. I was like spiraling all of this stuff. I'm like, oh my God. Like, and I had no real like reason other than trauma to think about that. And I think the idea that this could just be happy and nice is also very still scary. And one day I just like was talking to my therapist. I was like, I'm going to end up manifesting him breaking up with me. Like, I'm going to bring that in if I keep thinking about that and stressing about that. And so one day I just decided, I was like, nah, like, I'm going to manifest that this is going to end in a happy marriage and I'm going to be in love. And that's what this is going to be. And ultimately, you know, you only get to decide your side. I think I was talking about like the idea of like, when you know is very one-sided, right? Like, I do still think that's scary because it's like, well, maybe you know, but do they know? But ultimately I'm like, I'm just going to decide that this is going to end happy and I'm going to love because I have a lot of love to give. And whether this ends up in a way that I end up getting hurt or not, it's an amazing experience. And I'd rather be myself and love and get hurt and hope for the best than to hold myself back and worry and then be like negative about it. So I'm just trying to go in with as much, like happiness and love and sharing that as I can.
It is so cool to see you from, you know, way back when you were in the toxic, you know, relationship and see the difference in you now. It's like you really are a completely different person, like so much more full of light, happiness. Like you just radiate that so much more now compared to before, you know, when I was just getting to know you and you were in that. It's just really cool to see that difference.
Oh, I mean, when I was in a corporate job, I got sent to a diplomatic communications class because everyone thought I was a bitch. Like,
what?
Yeah. I mean, I still like every once in a while, I think that, and this is something that I've grown that I'm not going to put on myself is that, especially in person, I think, I'm tall. I like to dress well. I carry myself well. And that tends to lead I do kind of have a resting bitch face. And so a lot of people will tell me that they find me very intimidating. And so I'm like, well, that's something for a long time. I was like, oh, like whatever. I'm like, well, no, because if you're intimidated by me, I know that that's not who I am and that's not the like how I treat people. So I'm going to let that be on other people. Yeah. But definitely something where I am just like so much more open and willing to like meet people, and I think that I just have like a better presence about me and I'm happier. And I still get it every once in a while that people are like and also like I'm kind of like surprisingly a little bit of a like I would say like an extroverted introvert kind of thing where big
Same.
groups of people or things like that is not necessarily my favorite, where I will kind of be a little bit more quiet. But yeah, I don't know. I think like it's crazy to me that, oh my God, the amount of times people just assume I am the biggest bitch. And I'm like, I I mean, I can be a bitch, but only if you do something that deserves it.
Yeah, and it's such like that trope of like intimidating, confident women are bitches, and it's like,
Yeah.
no,
That's a
like
you problem.
that is
Yes.
not my problem. I'm confident. I'm living my life. I'm loving it. And it is such like I have such a resting bitch face all the time. And like it's just like
Same.
why? Like why does it just like drop like that? Because when you talk, it's like you feel the light and the energy and the goodness. And so it's just
Mhm.
so funny, like the juxtaposition of like resting bitch face, so much light and energy. It's like, what the
Yeah.
God.
I
Well,
love that.
I'm gonna cut Allie off because that's my job. But Justine, loved having you on. We're definitely gonna have to have you on again, and we probably have like a million different things we could talk about. Is there anything you want? Obviously, your podcast, if you want to pitch that again, we would love people to listen to that as well.
Yeah, if you guys want to check out Villain Era podcast, it's on Spotify and Apple. We usually release new episodes on Fridays. I am on a little holiday break right now, but otherwise, if you want some sex and dating and love bombing and a little bit of fitness sprinkled in their stories, that's definitely the podcast to come listen to.
That's
Awesome.
awesome. We're also going to link that below in the show notes so you guys can be lazy and just like scroll and then click it and go listen to her podcast. But thank you again so much for coming on. This was super, super fun. And I hope you had fun too. And just thank you for being so vulnerable and open,
Mhm.
because that's not always the easiest thing to do. I know for you, it feels okay and safe, but I really just, I want you to know that like, we
No, I
appreciate
was
that.
not necessarily planning to talk about all of this on here. So,
Uh,
and
That's just
also
what
it's crazy. I feel
happens.
like we just like scratched the surface of anything.
oh,
Totally,
I'm sure.
totally.
I'm sure.
All right,
Uh,
so we will see you guys in the next episode. And again, thank you, Justine, for coming. Bye.
Thank you guys.
Bye. Thank you guys so much for listening or watching Kinda Hot, Kinda Healthy. Please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us so we can reach more women just like you. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you can stream podcasts. If you have a burning question about life, friendships, health, or 1 or 2 cents, email us at kindahotpod@gmail.com. That's KINDAHOTPOD@gmail.com. Bye.
Bye.